All right, let's get started. So let's see. First off, we have some action items. I think we didn't really follow up on these, but Central's you're gonna take over the case-by-case uplift. The thing I would say is, I forget if I said this already. I think I did. I talked a little to the Clippy folks, and their kind of consensus seemed to be, roughly speaking, if you all don't want the lints, that's fine. We're not going to do the work to move them over.
Right.
I think I'm reading between the lines a bit. I sensed a little frustration, which I think is fair because I think they did a lot of work on organizing things. On the other hand, I think it's also okay to say we'll do them case by case. So probably we should just close it and.
I think the conclusion was that people will, if we make it an easy issue, people will show up and do that.
I think that the issue includes some good documentation of which lints are likely to be easily moved over to RFC. It's more just an issue of it never made sense to track all of these in one issue, as though we were trying to make Clippy redundant in one step.
So is the action item specifically to, I think what we wrote there is proposed case-by-case uplift, but do we plan to go open sub-issues for specific lints, or are we just going to handle it on their own as they wish?
I think
that someone should open sub-issues. I don't know that we want to commit to being the ones that open the sub-issues.
I think just we would encourage people who want to move a lint over to do it and follow this.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if I guess it's fine to just leave that comment in the issue for now. It seems like something we.
Yeah, and depending on the lint, it might, the involvement from the language team might be like SCP or a few people writing, some people from the language team writing a comment or something. This seems fine.
Right. The procedure would basically be port the lint and ping teams.
Yep.
That sounds good. I will do that. I will do something. I think I've been going back and forth about this TurboFish RFC, as we said. I've come around to, well, whatever happens, it has to be closed clearly. So I'll probably close it and write some heartfelt comment on something. But maybe we can discuss if we want to reopen them. I want to reach out to, is it Varkor? Whoever wrote it. I think it was Varkor.
Varkor, yes.
Write a comment. None zero. Okay. Do we need discussion on any of these other points?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So advertisement and question. For the upcoming next 2 weeks, I'll put in here. I was thinking of these topics, cover the DIN trait coherence bug, and then maybe this FFI unwind meeting around the C versus C unwind question, trying to just put all up cards on the table and settle that. But I was wondering about, we never did do this kind of, can we not try to write out the things we're doing and how we feel about them and what our priorities should be. We could swap that for January 20th, or we could defer it till later. I wanted to see what people thought. Either way, I plan to write a blog post today. I actually already wrote the blog post, but I didn't post it, saying that we'll do that. But I'm hoping to get a little ahead of things.
So what was the question?
The question is, I guess, should we use a meeting to discuss? We had planned we thought about doing a meeting on kind of, everybody brings together things that they think should be priorities and which ones they might like to work on, which ones they would feel comfortable with other people working on, just want to see it done. That never really happened. And I was thinking that seems like a perfectly good use for a design meeting. but I don't know whether to schedule it now, or we could let it sit and discuss a little more so we know exactly what we're planning to do.
Having a meeting on the 20th seems fine to me.
Right, but which one? Would we rather discuss this FFI online question, or should we try to organize the roadmap meeting? But I think we don't have enough, you may not have enough people here right now to answer that question too.
Discussing it by online on the 20th seems fine.
All right, I say we'll do that. We'll do that. I'm going to try to clear this up and make that be the next topic for February. I'm assuming we won't have a meeting on the 27th. I wouldn't be available. But if people want to, I don't have a problem with it.
Let's see. Bobs won't be there, you won't be there, Felix won't be there.
Right.
I doubt we will have enough people there.
All right, let's move on. Separated item updates. Anything in here? I think these are all old, right? This is definitely old. Josh, how much have you been following like the inline assembly and SafeTransmute stuff? Has that been progressing? Has it kind of stalled out because of holidays, or?
So holidays aside, Amaniu has been doing a great deal of work on the inline assembly working group and filing issues and going through issues and processing issues. And I expect to see the first round of actual RFCs happening for preliminary work. Sorry, I should be more specific. I'm expecting to see the first RFC show up soon, which is just the RFC for let's deprecate the existing ASM and move it to LLVM ASM.
That already was filed.
Oh, good. Okay.
I don't know why that needs to be an RFC. So.
Because it will break people using nightly, and it's worth at least discussing and agreeing to.
We break people nightly
answer,
all the time without any RFC. Or I mean, I think this.
I am aware of this. I think it's worth officially ratifying and going through a process of consensus rather than just doing it.
Right. If it's not controversial, then let's just FCP merge.
Yeah, I'm all for FCP merging it. I'm also all for like shouting from the rooftops that this is happening and going through a reasonable timeline for doing so.
One other point.
So one thing I would, the point with these project groups and having like an RFC to start a project group before seems to be, it was to like, okay, we want to confirm whether this is something we want to do before any work is done. And so why is work being done before there seems to be a lot of work going on in the project group?
I wanted to raise the fact that, which I think is maybe the same question, that we didn't merge the RFC to add the project group, which I think we.
Yeah, that's the.
I don't know quite why we haven't, I guess. And I was going to.
I'm not clear on that either, but.
I think you had concerns, Central.
Yep, I just need time to write them down.
So what I had planned to bring up today, but we kind of sidelined into it, was to say, like, should we, if there's significant concern, I feel like we should schedule something, whether that be a private discussion between you and Josh or whatever it needs to be to get that resolved so we can move or not move. But like the indeterminate status is something I'm trying to avoid, right?
Yeah, that would be helpful.
So from my perspective, on the internals, I stated in pretty clear terms that I didn't think we should do this on one thread, and then there was a bunch of discussion, and it seems like, and I specifically said that I don't think we should do this like now, because we're having like we're cleaning up a bunch of technical debt. We don't have the time for this, etc. And sort of, I feel like me saying that we shouldn't do this somehow turned into people discussing it a lot, and now we're doing it.
I think you're giving yourself a little bit too much credit if you think that anybody advocating doing it was especially doing so in response to you saying we shouldn't. It's just that there are a lot of people who know that we need this.
What? I think this is a great conversation to have, but I'm curious why you think it's increasing technical debt central as opposed to paying it down.
Well, it's increasing technical debts and the work we need to do on nightly. Inline assembly is nothing we have to work on right now. Like we could, if we were to like remove it, then there would be nothing to work on.
What I mean,
that's not going to happen.
right.
I mean, so I understand the point of view that you have from a perspective of we want to reduce the amount of complexity and technical debt involved. And I think part of doing that is specifically, let's take the thing that directly passed through LLVM's feature and is the source of very easy internal compiler errors all the time, move that aside so that people can temporarily use it while we're building a new thing. Hopefully eventually remove it with a transition plan, or possibly no transition plan if everybody likes the new thing and we can build a compatibility macro of some kind. And then in the meantime, build something that is much more principled, much easier to stabilize, and much less generating of technical debt. So this is the path for dropping the painful thing we have.
So I guess I don't agree that, or well, my assessment is different. I don't think that the new thing will. I think the new thing will also have a substantial amount of problems, and more than that, I think there is a lot of work that needs to be done, and like we have a lot of other things that are important that needs to be done, and I don't think that this is even nearly as important. That's
why we're creating a project group full of people who are willing to do that work.
I was just going to ask that. I think one of the big factors for me, we should possibly, like we said, we don't want to spend too much time on any one topic, and I think we're borderline here, but I'd like to go for another few minutes because it seems important. Especially because I feel like we're trying to figure out the process around project groups. But one thing I think was important to me was that Aniu was there and willing to do the work, including implementation work. One thing I think is missing maybe is, I don't know, I would like to see a reviewer or someone from the compiler side who's kind of, like maybe we should discuss this at a compiler design meeting.
I think this is not something that one person can do. This is a like big project, I think. This is like the async, in size, I would think this is like async await or like infiltrate.
I think it's a lot more contained than that, but I will freely say I don't think it's a one-person task. I also think we have more than one person digging into it.
I think it's one person, like...
One person's doing a lot of the RFC work, certainly.
Yeah, and I think that will take up a lot of the language team's time, and I think that's not a good use of time.
Yeah, I guess that's the core question. Is it will definitely take up time.
It will take up a lot of my time, and I'm willing to spend that time.
Well,
not a good use.
I think it will take up other people's time thinking about the design decisions as well. Like Nico needs to, and the rest of the team needs to think about these things as well.
But they don't need to be thought about until after the project team comes back with an RFC to think about. That's kind of the point of delegating this to a project team. We're busy, so we're delegating it. Come back when you have a proposal and we'll consider the proposal at that time.
I guess the question
point of
is,
project teams is to offload work from us.
I would be, my assumption is that I think that this is something that would kind of fits into a broader thing of improving the story around unsafe code and the ergonomics and the set of things we can support. And not unsafe code is the wrong term, systems programming, let's say. And we've kind of called it C parity. I think that was a very specific version. There's a kind of broader story. So that seems like a valid use of time to me if we have people who want to do the work. I think that was kind of my take on it, was we've been blocked a lot.
I guess we just disagree on priorities.
Perhaps so, which is partly why I was saying maybe we should have a meeting to discuss prioritization. But, I do agree
but
with
also, like, I think,
all here.
personally, I think this is a niche feature that, like, adds a lot of, that doesn't really fit with Rust's compilation model and things. And
I feel like we're rehaving the entire discussion that we had on the internals thread of explaining why people need this feature. I don't think that's a productive use of this meeting.
sure. I would also like to move on.
All right, I think it was time to move on, but all right. I'm going to put a follow-on item to figure out how we'll resolve this.
I guess I need to write down my concerns in the RFC.
We'll start with that. Central to comment on. I don't know though that that's really going to move things forward, but it can't hurt.
Well, it's clarifying at least.
Right. It's at least useful to put out there what your position is in a canonical way that people can read. All right. I guess I will say, to summarize, minutes from meeting. Discussed whether this was a good use of prioritization, or a high enough priority to pursue now. Some disagreement. All right.
Okay, so let's see. SafeTransmute, the RFC got merged.
This got merged. I don't know any other updates here. I don't think there are any.
At the moment, it has been mostly on hold over the holidays, with the exception that we've been reviewing a few more libraries, including one that just came out that does another form of SafeTransmute that has a more general equality, like type equivalence mechanism. That
I assume this is Typic.
That's the one. So we've been reviewing Typic as well as others, and looking at what we want the structure of the RFC to look like, what we want the structure of the feature to look like. So we're firmly in the pre-design brainstorming phase at this point.
Cool. I don't think there's anything specific to mention. Except that in the syntax for the const traits bound thingy was experimentally merged.
Say that again, or possibly type it directly.
One sec, I find the PR instead. So we have an RFC to add like question mark const and input const trait. That RFC hasn't been merged yet, but we decided to experiment with this unlikely anyways, and the PR to implement the syntax has done. I think. Or well, it hasn't done it, it seems, but it exists.
Right. I thought someone was taking notes, but it was another part of the thing. Okay, so implementing syntax for const bounds. That was really strange grammar, but
Bit of a garden path, yes.
okay.
And if I unwind,
well, we have the meeting scheduled. I don't think there's any major updates beyond that are worth going over now. We're planning to, Kyle and I are planning to schedule some time to next week so we can put together all the arguments on and new and interesting things that have been uncovered in discussions into one place before the meeting. For the DIN trade stuff, same thing. We have an upcoming the meeting's next Monday. I have had some thoughts in the meantime about. I'll try to collect. I don't want to put them here because they're not to the top of mind. But I'm trying to look for. I would like us to just to cover the problem, but also to discuss what are the immediate steps we can take to close the soundness hole, and in particular around breakage. I think there might be some options I hadn't considered before, but we'll discuss it then.
I think there are no updates from the grammar.
Yeah.
Like.
So LLogic and I are scheduling a time to pair program and get the lint going next week. So our schedules didn't quite overlap, but I have a new message from him I haven't looked at yet. So maybe we did find a time.
Cool.
Shepherding, okay. P-high issues, usage of erroneous constant. Is there anything new on this?
It seems like, well, first we had a consensus of what to do, and then sort of that changed, or well, it got murkier.
Okay.
Or something.
I don't really know what.
Well, it's the same as the replace our fragile safety schema and erroneous constants. Josh had thoughts.
It has to do with the reachability.
Yes.
Okay.
So I think that we should. I think that we should stick with the plan that we discussed on the first meeting, that you and I agreed to go, and then if we should relax things some other time, I think it would be good to do that in like a planned way.
What is relaxed?
I suppose.
Fewer errors.
Like allowing more code. Yeah, if seeing more code as dead, I think we should do that in a more planned way, like with RFCs and whatnot, and integrate that into post generics and like definitional equality and so.
Okay. Like what we said was we will use the same definition of what's reachable as borrow check does. Right?
Yeah.
And what's
that was what. Yeah, it seems like Josh disagreed with that.
Josh, what did you think would be better?
I'm actually typing up something right now to try to follow up on that and offer a path forward.
Okay. Do you want to tell us what you're typing, or should we move on? Come back to it.
I just posted it. The short version is I do think that that's something that needs to be thought about in the solution, but I think it should be possible to work around without breaking the kernel style use case. Most of the time, stubs would tend to be either constant successes or constant failures, but they're a lot less likely to be constant panics. So I don't think it's especially likely that you would, inside of an if branch, define a constant that calls a method that has been stubbed out and that method panics. I think that the more likely scenario is you have non-constant code in an if branch that calls stub functions that panic. And since the if will never be taken, all that code will get compiled out.
Yes.
So I'm not actually worried about compile time panics for this case, which means I'm withdrawing the objection that I had.
Okay. Very good.
Okay.
I think I just had to think through the use case very carefully to make sure that that wouldn't break a common pattern.
Can you just clarify? It's not super clear from your comment that you withdrew the objection. Could you just clarify a bit?
Sure, I can edit the comment to explicitly say that I'm withdrawing any objection.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, so we had a meeting for the pin stuff.
Yeah, so we had our meeting on the pin stuff. I don't know what, all of us were there, I think. I don't know, maybe not everybody in the call, but in any case, I prepared this PR in the meantime that implements the negative, sort of minimal negative impl approach that Ralph and Boats were discussing, where you can have an explicit negative impl. Its only function is to prevent people from writing other impls. It doesn't enable any new impls that wouldn't have been allowed before. So it's kind of purely subtractive from the set of code that we accept. And in the PR we added, at least I believe that to be true, we added impls like these two. What was the other one? Not clone for, oh, and mute T.
And so this is a positive witness for the negative case.
Yes. And so now using these impls combined with or if you take the proof obligation as Ralph outlined it, you kind of have to either prove, the way I would say it is something like this. You have to say there is a deref mute impl or there is a deref impl and the target meets these properties, and the return value meets these properties, sorry. Or there is a not deref mute impl, or, in other words, you don't, one of those two things has to be true. So you have either way a kind of positive proof that you attach to. The question is, I put an FCP merge, and I'm floating it here. I know Central you had wanted more time to read. I don't know if you got a chance to read Ralph's write-up.
No, sorry. I feel like I was like a bit like I was physically present on the meeting, but my brain was like half not there because it was very difficult to understand something.
It's fairly dense.
Yes.
Okay.
So I will try to read up.
The soundness has been. We're doing a crater run now. Obviously, we want to close it. I don't think it's like, urgent that we close it today or tomorrow. But I would encourage you to check it out then.
Yeah. Could that have any performance implications?
Like compilation time or
yes,
runtime? I don't
compilation
know. I wouldn't expect so. We could do a test, but I mean, it's an extra impl, but
yeah, I was just thinking that like maybe there would be more branches in the logic and
no, it's actually less branches because
I see.
The code used to say if there's an auto, basically the main diff is it used to say report an error if you see a negative impl and the trade is not an auto trade, and now it doesn't. Because
Okay, so it will more likely improve performance.
And we already tested performance for what it's worth, so
exactly.
it was clean.
Oh, we
Cool.
did. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's really a light change. It just happens that the semantics of negative impulse were basically already this. We just restricted them to auto. So,
Right.
all right. Moving down, pin, we already, oh, I broke off, one thing is the coerce unsized, there's still an unsoundness related to the use of coerce unsized. I broke that off into a separate issue. This one can't be realized on stable, and there's some ongoing discussion about it. I don't think we need to say more now. It kind of comes down to we need to decide somewhere we need to add an extra contract into the coerce unsized rules around pinning. But exactly what that contract is not known. Casting or adding, oh, okay. Do we want to cover this one?
Yeah, sure.
Which one, sorry?
Casting or adding type description to panic triggers unreachable code.
Found it.
I don't think this would be so tricky to implement this code as in TypeCheck.
The idea was to just not, if you have a lint that's, sorry, an as or something that's dead code, you just don't lint
Yeah.
it.
And so one question would be like, should this just be for type description, or should this also be for costs? And like if it's for coercions in general, then coercions due to the return type would presumably also not trigger anything.
The reason that it makes sense to do this, like we basically lint on all compound expressions that where some part, where it becomes unreachable. But the reason it makes sense to exempt these is specifically because they inform type inference, right? And they might get errors without them, kind of.
They also don't do any, they also won't end up generating any code, right?
Well,
They can.
I mean, they can. The code is going to get stripped anyway. It's like
That's what I mean, yes.
Going to be good.
Yeah. I have no objections to this.
I mean, that seems like adequate justification to me. Like the point of the link is to be useful, not, it doesn't, it's just annoying to get a warning about code that you can't remove. So and I don't think it's like particularly likely to lead to a bug that you have this as in there.
Yeah. So
I'd say we do it.
yeah. Do you want to write comments?
Sure. So eco to comment on saying it makes sense because these expressions are useful for ensuring type inference succeeds, roughly speaking. Okay.
Let's see. Partially implementation for range inclusive is unsound. So many unsoundness bugs. Yeah.
So right. So this is some. It's horrible. You don't want to look at it. But suffice to say, there's some unsoundness. What I took a look at some point, and it comes down to that we have this specialization, and oh yeah, I remember now. So this specialization kind of violates the sound variant of specialization that we know of. However, if we were to do the kind of full version of the proposal that Aaron sketched out, then that wouldn't be true. Like what it comes down to is we're specializing on the basis that you are both partial EQ and partial ORD, and that can be a lifetime sensitive test. So that's why it's unsound. But the specialization variant, the idea that Aaron was floating was essentially that you would have a way to say, not only does it implement partial ORD, essentially, but it implements it with the extra condition that it's also a lifetime invariant impl. So in that case, you would have screened out the troublesome impl here that's causing problems.
But this is observable on stable, right?
It is observable on stable. So the question
So I
is,
guess the immediate question is what we should do with the impl.
right. I think the immediate question is, should we remove the stabilization? The argument in favor is it's unsound. The argument against is, but it usually works and it probably would eventually work. So we're de-optimizing people's code for some kind of semi-artificial example, but then again, not impossibly artificial. And then the next question is like maybe just more input into the prioritization process writ large. It
seems very clear to me that we should so comment out the input and like leave a fixed need to add it back when we can. That's what I would do.
Yeah, I lean that way too. The other question then is, I suspect a great many of the specializations we have are unsound in the same way, because there's really not much you can do without. We have to look. Maybe it may not be true.
So maybe we should not add more of them.
Right. So we should we do an audit? Should we I think at minimum any new specialization should be run by we should try to encourage people to ping the lang. And
yes.
I think now that we have an idea what the right rules are, we can actually answer this question. But plausibly,
yeah, I think that makes sense. But I think doing an audit would take a lot of time, possibly. Maybe if we do like open an issue and encourage people to participate, it might happen. But otherwise, without having static analysis to help us, it would be hard.
Yeah, I feel similarly mixed around doing an audit. I think it's the right thing to do, but we have a lot of things going on. I might rather put that energy towards let's talk about the real specialization fix, maybe code up the static rule or something.
I think there's one tiny value in doing a partial audit, which is to say, if there are 20 specializations in the standard library that have this problem, then we're not going to be commenting out all of them, presumably, because some of them are more or less necessary to be reasonable.
We would perf test them, I guess.
It's possible that we could write up I would bet somebody like LQD or some of the other people around the product team might be into, you need someone who's somewhat savvy with the type system to apply the rule because it's non-trivial, but
frankly, I think you need somebody who's rather savvy with the type system to understand the bug.
Yes. I mean, it's actually not that, yeah, okay.
Can we add this to the list of, Nico's type system corner topics?
Well, I was wondering, on my list of things to do in a future design meeting was to discuss specialization and what our plan forward should be, because it seems like it comes up all the time.
Yeah, this is the first time I've heard something that's oh, this is why specialization is not as trivial as it seems. This is why I'm saying it might be worth a further exploration is this is incredibly non-obvious.
Why don't we do this? Upcoming design meetings. Or let's say, I'm going to throw it as an action item. You go to schedule a specialization infomercial where we'll kind of cover what does specialization do, what is the soundness problem, what is the proposal, or what is the fix, just kind of the background.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, that sounds reasonable. I can use
Just
it.
to get a broad idea here, how hard is this considered to fix? As in the extended version, is that considered order of magnitude? Somebody needs to sit down and implement it for a year, a month, a week, or a day?
I don't know, but I would say between a month and a year.
Good to know.
I don't think it's. I guess it depends. Also, there's like variations of the fix.
I guess it's also a question of like making sure that what we implemented is actually sound.
There's a lot of. I think that was the right answer, but maybe it's a little more than a month, maybe 6 months. It depends on, like I said, how much there's design work involved, depending on how involved we want the fix to be. Like I think we could write a lint that rejects unsound specializations. Maybe that wouldn't be so hard, especially if we do the most crude test, which would have sufficed in this case. But the problem is that, like I said, a lot of really useful specializations get ruled out. There's not a lot you can do without the enhanced version, but not all of them.
That still makes.
I'll be
That
right
might
back
make
to get a
sense to do as an internal lint, just for the sound library.
I mean, that gives weight to the let's do some audit, because it'd be nice to know, like, the things that should work are basically where you have generic types and then specific types. Like you specialize, you have one for all T and then one for like vec iter and stuff like that. Those should be okay. It's these ones where there are two that are both generic. Basically just can't do that normally. So actually, the audit is complex.
Why is it exactly that two generic, I mean, feel free to say because it's complicated and needs more exploration in a separate meeting, but why are the two impls shown here in the example, the evil impls, why are those two allowed to be considered as enabling the specialization when they're not actually for the same type?
Let's talk about it in the.
Okay.
It's 3:45, and then let's talk about it after. But
okay.
I want to clarify one thing I just said, which was I said that two generic impls we can't do soundly, but what I meant is without something like the proposal that Aaron and I cooked up. We have a plan for how to do that sort of thing, but it will take a little discussion around it. I also think it's worth talking about because I think it could intercept the addition. Like it might. We'll talk about that in the meeting, though. Some of the
Okay.
But in the short term, we're going to comment out this unsound impl, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Do we have an idea of how much performance we're losing if we do that?
That's definitely.
But I can't be that much. I don't know.
I mean, I'm asking because range inclusive already has substantial performance issues, and this would presumably make it worse.
Yeah. So we should at least try it and see, I guess, but I don't know.
Who is leaving a comment?
We might be able to I'll leave a comment because I want to go into some detail about some of the alternatives we could replace it with that would be sound, which might help recover some of that performance. I don't know.
Moving on to transparent unions and enums, specifically just enums now, not unions. I was proposing that we stabilize the record transparent on univariant enums. It's not a big deal, but it simplifies some code, and it seems nice to me that univariate enums and structs should behave similarly in most cases. So I was going to write up a report if no one has any objections.
I think we should do it. Okay, shall we move on from that? No objections to writing a report?
No objections here.
Art crop, potentially dangling shared refs. This is another one of those, we've been saying we should discuss it. We really want Ralph. I want to.
Let's.
Now that we have design meetings, let's do one in February or something.
Yeah.
All right. Ralph doesn't like that time, but he'll do it if we apply arm bending pressure.
Implicit color location.
Yeah, I wanted to raise this up. So this is that RFC, which means that when you call dot unwrap, you don't get a useless line number, you get a useful line number. So it allows you to figure out who your caller is to a certain extent. And the implementation technique that we wound up taking, as I understand it, this is a bit hand-wavy, but it's what I picked up from skimming around this morning, is that essentially you tag the callee and it's kind of part of our ABI, so to speak, the Rust ABI, is we know that some functions have this attribute, and in that case we pass extra information identifying the caller, which might have come from our own caller transitively, and if we also have this attribute. And this works great in the sense that it's like a lightweight modification. It also means you can't ever, I think we just don't pass the information if you pass through a virtual function call, because we can't know in that case what function is being called. So in that case, we generate a shim around it or something so that it works.
As if we had passed a closure?
What's that?
As if we had passed a closure that also passes that extra string?
Yeah, but not a closure in that there's no extra state or anything, but yeah, you basically are kind of adding an implicit argument. And so if you coerce the function to a function pointer, we'll make a wrapper that supplies the value for that argument, like a default.
Makes sense.
And the point is, this works fine through traits. The original RFC was kind of afraid that they couldn't, because they was implemented with some other scheme, like an upfront desugaring in the here or something, and made it hard to do through traits. But this scheme, which is in the back end, works just fine. And I see no reason that we shouldn't. They were, Adam Perry wanted to sort of get confirmation that he can go ahead and turn it on so that you can attach this attribute also in an impl. And I think we should.
So specifically, you attach it to trait methods in impls.
Right.
And never on the trait, inside the trait definition itself.
Right. It makes no sense to put it in the trait. Well, you could have done sense, but it's not what we do.
And this would also work with dyn traits then.
Dyn trait would work like a function pointer, right? So you won't trace, you'll lose the information if you do it through a virtual call. Just like
that seems reasonable.
If you call via function pointer.
Yeah, my understanding of track caller is mostly like it's a quality of implementation thing.
What do you mean?
So, like, if it's not perfect around dyn trait, that's fine.
I see. It's a best effort result, you mean, in other words?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we specified it like that. Like, we will give you a location. It might be your current. We'll give you a function that is either like the current location, which you would have got before, or something better if we can.
So just to clarify that, then that also means that we interpret track caller as like it would be a legitimate implementation of it to do nothing, basically.
It could do nothing per the language spec, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. In that case, it not doing anything for trait objects seems fine. Totally fine.
Okay.
So it's just trios from the language team here, but
it's hard for me to imagine.
I think we can go ahead and anyways.
Yeah. All right. Undefined behavior around floating point integer casts. This, I know we're like just sort of stalling here for want of anyone to pay enough attention to move this ball forward. Does that sound right?
So the discussion is around what the semantics should be of costs here. I guess we need a design meeting for this or something, or not.
Do we? It seems like the first thing we need is a summary of like what has happened. Hold on.
Yeah, yes. I guess it would be a summary of the options would be good. Seems like we lost Nico.
I think Nico was asking for more than just a summary of the options. Like he was interested in the history behind the
Yeah, I think that would.
registration.
I see. That would probably take more time. So I believe. So
What I was asking for was, I would say, a summary of what has happened. Like we have some options, and we've done measurements and asked for feedback on some cases, and then there was some further discussion. I feel like it's time to like collect all that into one thing, and that would be the summary I'm talking about. So
right.
maybe we can ask for someone to write it on the thread. I don't know. Someone who is motivated.
Yeah, that seems.
Like Simone might be game.
That seems like a good idea.
Let's do that. So a summary of what options have been evaluated and what were the results, what options exist. I would say whoever does that statement can also be recommended option. Like that. The bonus is they get to recommend the one they think is best. That's the enticement.
Okay.
I don't know. All right.
Who is leaving those comments?
4 minutes left. What's happening with this?
It's being experimented.
Who wants to leave this comment? I feel like I'm leaving a lot of comment. All right. Okay. Oh, right. We're doing nightly experiments. We said that. Yes.
The turbofish redundant thingy we've already discussed.
Yeah, somebody just needs to be the person to stick their neck out and write the appropriate comment, and then FCP close the thing, or just close the thing.
I think I'm just gonna close it.
Okay.
It's been installed for a year. Close is postponed.
Postponed, yes, agreed.
Target feature 1.1. What's this?
So it's someone needs to say I want to implement this.
Oh, that's what we blocked on that.
Someone did say that, and now we need somebody to remove a concern listed saying that somebody needs to do that.
I don't feel like this was that comment actually said.
Wait. The concern is that there was no one to implement?
Yes.
Okay. That's the only remaining concern?
Yes.
Okay, this is interesting.
So
How complex
this,
do we think this is to implement?
Matthew, do you know, perhaps? So this would be in the type checker somewhere in collection, probably.
I don't honestly remember what this even does. I remember making variations.
So
This thing, okay.
I think it would be somewhere in collection. It's probably not that much work.
That complicated.
Most of the work would be tests, probably.
Yeah, it's making me wonder about. I feel like we need. Like this came up also with the inline assembly. I mean, there are other concerns there, but in general, I've been advocating we should try to get implementers on board early. I'm wondering if we should just have some sort of call for implementation mechanism, just somewhere to post, hey, we're looking for someone to pick this up and carry it. We're waiting to move forward because we need that. But the thing
is there a reason that state is not called RFC has been accepted and we're waiting for someone to implement it?
Yeah. What I don't like about what we do now is I would rather that this was happening earlier. Like we get these RFCs that are accepted and then it's like 2 years later, somebody goes to like implement it, and I'd rather we move quickly, which from
right, and then no one has any context left because we've all forgotten by then.
Right, and the designer people are gone by then and don't remember what's happening again. I
I certainly hope that's something that the project group's mechanism can help solve.
That's what I believe. Yeah. I'm thinking aloud that the reason it would be a different mechanism is because it would be happening before this point is reached, ideally. But anyway, I'll have to skim, but I don't think this would be too hard to implement, but we need a reviewer. Maybe we can bring it up somewhere.
Maybe we can discuss it for the next comparison meeting, perhaps.
Yeah, the easiest thing to do would be to post a comment or something on T-compiler.
Where?
In Zulip. A comment saying,
oh yeah.
Anyone interested in implementing this? I kind of feel like we could, I don't know that we need to find implementer before we lay on the RFC, but I'm not totally opposed to it either. Just because we've never done it before, but.
Yeah, I'm starting to come around to the idea that this wouldn't be very difficult to implement now that I'm thinking about where it would be implemented. So.
The other change we could make is to say, we'll merge it, and in general, things that don't get implemented within, I kind of feel like RFC expiration wouldn't be totally crazy, except that half the things I'm trying to work on have expired by now. But,
well, at least some initial work. It doesn't have to be everything.
I mean, at that point, I would have to ask, what would be gained by going back through the RFC process before anyone is allowed to pick it up again?
Well, I don't know, but I think something. Yeah, it's a good question. It would be like if the context has changed or something. Anyway, let's call the meeting. It's over. We're not doing that. We're not doing this time period thing, so don't worry. It's just a crazy thought. Ciao, everyone.
Ciao.